Defense Intelligence Agency Reports on UFOs, Part 4. In 1985, the Defense Intelligence Agency released 139 pages of UFO-related reports. Here are some information related to those released files. In this segment, we will hear about events that took place in Korea, Spain, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran. 1970, Korea. The following report was received by the DIA from an official of the Republic of Korea Intelligence Agency. On 10 and 11 February 1970, a meeting of all commanding officers of ROK Air Force security units throughout the ROK was held at ROKAF headquarters in Seoul. At that meeting, the ROKAF Chief of Staff gave those in attendance a highly classified briefing concerning recent sightings of UFOs in Gangwon-do, ROK. Since the beginning of 1970, ROKAF radar stations along the eastern coast of the ROK in Gangwon-do have been detecting maneuvers of large balloon-shaped objects at high altitude just north of the extreme eastern sector of the Korean DMZ, also known as the Demilitarized Zone. On several occasions, these UFOs, which the ROKAF officials are assuming to be dirigibles because of their shape and speed, have penetrated ROK airspace, traveled in a southeasterly direction over Gangwon-do, and then exploded. ROK efforts to recover debris subsequent to the explosions have been unsuccessful. The ROKAF Chief of Staff speculated that if current maneuvers of the UFOs prove to be successful, then North Korea may use the self-propelled balloons for dropping agents, propaganda, or even epidemic germs into the ROK. His briefing and speculation caused consternation on the ROKAF security unit COs because this was the first report they had had on such penetrations. 1973 to 1974, Spain. A wave of sightings in Spain in 1973 to 74 attracted DIA attention, and Captain Richard Fox, acting defense attaché in Madrid, forwarded summaries of 29 sightings which had been translated from local newspaper reports. Fox pointed out that the reports had not been checked for their validity, but that the data was being forwarded strictly for information of those parties interested. One of the sightings was witnessed on 23 March 1974 by the chauffeur of the president of the Cadiz Provincial Commission on a highway near Sanlúcar do Barrameda. A luminous metallic object moved up with great brilliancy. As the observer approached the object, he felt a strange sensation. His car finally came practically to a stop, wavering back and forth like a feather. Another interesting report was made by a truck driver at Valdejalderos on the night of 27 March 1974, who allegedly saw, quote, 3 silver ships parked on the highway with lights similar to a floodlight, unquote. Observers stopped the motor of his car and some figures approached him. He ran, frightened, and they followed him. He threw himself into a gutter. His pursuers passed within 2 meters and he saw them. They were about 2 meters tall, had arms and legs, but he did not see their faces. After they passed, he returned to the truck. The beings returned to observe him again. Then they entered their ships and left. Next day, the Guardia Civil made an investigation. They found a hole in the ground, which the truck driver said he had not made. Captain Fox commented, quote, "It is of interest to note that the April of this year, teams of extrasensory perception specialists held a meeting in Malaga for the purpose of scientifically studying the UFOs seen in that vicinity. Results of this meeting, unknown." In 1976, the Spanish government opened its files on UFOs to Juan José Benítez, a reporter of La Gaceta del Norte, who had been invited to Madrid by the Air Ministry. On 20th October, in an office of an Air Force Lieutenant General, who was Chief of Staff, Benítez was handed a file of 78 folio pages containing documentation on 12 of the best cases, as well as photographic material including film taken by Spanish Air Force pilots, which had hitherto been secret. 1974, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the USSR. A DIA intelligence information report with the delightful subject heading Balls of Fire contains a report translated from an Urdu language newspaper describing a sighting in December 1974. According to a statement by Mr. Muhammad Riaz, Executive Engineer Pakistan PWD Warsak, who was in Patan area about 7 p.m. on December 18th. A circular light appeared above the V-shaped mountain overlooking the approach to Patan. The circle around the light went on expanding. As the circle expanded, the light emanating from it became less and less. At first he thought it was a reflection from the moon, but the moon was in a different position. He said that the circular light went on expanding for about 15 to 25 minutes. 8 days after the appearance of this light, the area was shaken by the earthquake. At the time he saw the light, those present along with him were Razu Khan, Executive Engineer, Captain Tariq, a doctor, Mr. Farouk Khan, an officer with the Frontier Constabulary. The General Staff Army Attaché who prepared the report comments that ARMA has discussed these reports with DATT, ARMA, Afghanistan, who says that he has not heard of any such reports in Kabul. However, he has jokingly suggested that the phenomenon may simply have been sightings of Santa Claus preparing for Christmas. Despite DAO Kabul's skepticism, we would appreciate an evaluation from DIA. The DIA's evaluation has not been made available. The sighting, in my opinion, almost certainly relates to a barium cloud experiment released into the upper atmosphere by a rocket. 1976, Iran. One of the most important DIA documents is that describing the sensational sighting by the crew of the Imperial Iranian Air Force Phantom jets who encountered a UFO over Tehran in September 1976 when one of the jets attempted to fire a guided missile at it. The report was sent by the defense attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran to the DIA. The distribution list included the White House, Secretary of State, National Security Agency, and of course, the CIA. At about 12:30 a.m. on 19 September 1976, the Imperial Iranian Air Force Command Post received 4 telephone calls from citizens living in the Shamiran area of Tehran, saying that they had seen strange objects in the sky. Some reported a kind of bird-like object, while others reported a helicopter with a light on. There were no helicopters airborne at the time. The command post called B.G. Yosefi, Assistant Deputy Commander of Operations. After he told the citizen it was only stars and had talked to Mehrabad Tower, he decided to look for himself. He noticed an object in the sky similar to a star, but bigger and brighter. He decided to scramble an F-4 from Sherokai Air Force Base to investigate. B. The F-4 took off at 0130 hours and proceeded to a point about 40 nautical miles north of Tehran. Due to its brilliance, the object was easily visible from 70 miles away. As the F-4 approached a range of 25 nautical miles, it lost all instrumentation and communications, UHF and intercom. He broke off the intercept and headed back to Sherokai. When the F-4 turned away from the object and was apparently no longer a threat, the aircraft regained all instrumentation and communications. At 0140 hours, a second F-4 was launched. The backseater acquired a radar lock at 27 nautical miles, 12 o'clock high position with the VC, rate of closure at 150 nautical miles per hour. As the range decreased to 25 nautical miles, the object moved away at a speed that was visible on the radar scope and stayed at 25 nautical miles. C. The size of the radar return was comparable to that of a 707 tanker. The visual size of the object was difficult to discern because of its intense brilliance. The light that it gave off was that of flashing strobe lights arranged in a rectangular pattern and alternating blue, green, red, and orange in color. The sequence of the lights was so fast that all of the colors could be seen at once. The object and the pursuing F-4 continued on a course to the south of Tehran when another brightly lit object, estimated to be 1/2 to 1/3 the apparent size of the moon, came out of the original object. This second object headed straight toward the F-4 at a very fast rate of speed. The pilot attempted to fire an AIM-9 missile at the object, but at that instant his weapons control panel went off and he lost all communications, UHF and intercom. At this point, the pilot initiated a turn and -G dive to get away. As he turned, the object fell in trail at what appeared to be about 3 to 4 nautical miles. As he continued in his turn away from the primary object, The second object went into the inside of his turn when they returned to the primary object for a perfect rejoin. D. Shortly after the second object joined up with the primary object, another object appeared to be coming out of the other side of the primary object, going straight down at a great rate of speed. The F-4 crew had regained the communications and weapons control panels and watched the object approach the ground, anticipating a large explosion. This object appeared to come to rest gently on the earth and cast a very bright light over an area of about 2 to 3 kilometers. The crew descended from their altitude of 26 to 15 m and continued to observe and mark the object's position. They had some difficulty in adjusting their night visibility for landing, so after orbiting Mehrabad a few times, they went out for a straight-in landing. There was a lot of interference on the UHF, and each time they passed through the MAG, bearing a 150 degree from Mehrabad, they lost their communications, UHF and interphone, and the INS fluctuated from 30 degrees to 50 degrees. The one civil airliner that was approaching Mehrabad during this same time experienced communications failure in the same vicinity, Kilo Zulu, but did not report seeing anything. While the F-4 crew was on a long final approach, the crew noticed another cylinder-shaped object about the size of a T-bird at 10 meters, with bright steady lights on each end and a flasher in the middle. When queried, the tower stated there was no other known traffic in the area. During the time the object passed over the F-4, the tower did not have a visual on it, but picked up after the pilot told them to look between the mountains and the refinery. E. During daylight, the F-4 was taken out into the area in a helicopter where the object apparently had landed. Nothing was noticed at the spot where they thought the object landed, which was in a dry lake bed, but as they circled off to the west of the area, they picked up a very noticeable beeper signal. At the point where the return was the loudest was a small house with a garden. They landed and asked the people within if they had noticed anything strange the previous night. The people talked about a loud noise and a very bright light, like lightning. The aircraft and area where the object is believed to have landed are being checked for some possible radiation. RO comments. C. Actual information contained in this report was obtained from the source in conversation with a subsource, an IIAF pilot of one of the F-4s. More information will be forwarded when it becomes available. This exceptional report was originally released to Charles Huffer in 1977, although he had initially been denied the document. Attached to it was a DIA Defense Information Report evaluation, a rarity among documents released by the agency. The concluding comments are remarkable, an outstanding report. This case is a classic, which meets all the criteria necessary for a valid study of the UFO phenomenon. A. The object was seen by multiple witnesses with different locations, i.e., Shamaran, Mehrabad, and the dry lake bed, and viewpoints, both airborne and from the ground. B. The credibility of many of the witnesses was high, an Air Force general, qualified air crews, and experienced tower operators. C. Visual sightings were confirmed by radar. D. Similar electromagnetic effects, EMEs, were reported by 3 separate aircraft. E. There were physiological effects on some crew members, i.e., loss of night vision due to the brightness of the object. F. An inordinate amount of maneuverability was displayed by the UFOs. It is perhaps not without significance that the DIA chose to exclude this evaluation in the set of documents released to Ray Boash, although they included the actual intelligence report. One wonders just how many other positive evaluations remain classified in the DIA files at the Pentagon. Resources. Above Top Secret, Timothy Good, 1988. My take? This is just the tip of the iceberg of the government's real interest in UFOs. This information is just what has been released through the cracks in the government's cone of silence.